On the 2nd January 1492, Muhammad XI Abu Abdullah, the last of the Spanish sultans, pulled up rein on the summit of a small hill overlooking the long ridge southwest of Granada. Gazing for the last time at the lovely city in its green and fertile valley, he burst into tears. After losing the capital city of Granada, the last of the Nathari dynasty was exiled to the south of Granada. On their way there, King Boabdil could not help but look back at the kingdom which he had lost. It was on a small hill 12 kilometers south of Granada where the king stopped and looked back at the palace which he had lost. There he started crying, and his mother told him, "Do not cry like a woman that which you could not defend as a man."
वो जो अहमद भी है और मोहम्मद भी है, वो मुअय्यद भी है और मुअय्यद भी है, वो जो अहमद भी है और मोहम्मद भी है, वो मुअय्यद भी है और
Thus, 780 years after Tariq bin Ziyad had established a foothold for Islam, Muslim rule in the fair land of Al-Andalus, Spain, finally came to an end. Spain was conquered by the Romans in the 2nd century BC and was held by them for more than 500 years, until Visigoths from the north entered and took control. Christianity became the state religion, but by the 8th century the Christian clergy had neglected their spiritual role and started interfering with politics. The Jews and other minorities began to be persecuted, and the condition of the general population was woefully neglected. In 711, Tariq bin Ziyad, governor of Tangier in North Africa, took the momentous step of crossing the straits and establishing a beachhead at the foot of the great rock which is named after him, Jebel al-Tariq or Gibraltar.
रहबरो रहानुमा मुर्शिदो मुक्तदा मुजतबा मुस्तफा मुर्शिदो मुक्तदा मुजतबा.
When the Muslim army swept over the provinces of North Africa in the late 7th and early 8th centuries, only the fortress of Ceuta on the Moroccan coast opposite Gibraltar held out against them. As it happened, there was a quarrel at that time between Count Julian, the governor of Ceuta, and Roderick, the king of Spain. Count Julian, who needed assistance against Roderick, approached Musa, the son of Nusayr, the governor of North Africa, offering a plan for the Muslims to enter Spain. Musa sent a small body of 500 men under Tarif, who landed at the place which still bears his name, Tarifa. This is the southernmost point of Europe. From here, Africa is only 16.4 kilometers away. Also, on my left side, you can see the Atlantic Ocean, but if you go to my right side, you will see the Mediterranean Sea. On his return in July 710, Tarif seems to have reported that Spain was relatively defenseless, and also that Count Julian's loyalty to the Muslims could be depended upon. This report does not seem to have been entirely accurate, as Tariq was to discover. Encouraged by Tarif's venture, Musa in 711 dispatched Tariq across the straits with an initial force of 8,000 men. He was later reinforced by 5,000 men, making his force 13,000 strong. Tariq advanced inland when he perceived the whole force of the Goths under King Roderick blocking his path. Far from having entered a defenseless country, as Tariq had suggested, the Muslims now faced a formidable army of nearly 80,000 men, 6 times their number. When the Muslims saw the mighty army that Roderick had brought against them, their hearts sank for a moment. It may have been prudent and not at all cowardly for Tariq to make a tactical retreat and await additional reinforcements. But instead, he cried aloud, "Men, before you is the enemy, and the sea is at your backs. By Allah, there is no escape for you save in valor and resolution." This is where Tariq burnt the boats so there could be no turning back. His soldiers were now fully motivated, and they plucked up courage and shouted, "We will follow thee, O Tariq." The two armies met at Guadalete, near Cape Trafalgar, on the banks of a little river called Wadi Beka, close to where it entered the sea. The battle was extremely hard fought. For 1 week the fighting raged. We are near the town of Arcos. This is said to be the place where the Muslim army and the Goth army met and fought for several days. On the day of the last engagement, the sandals and the horse of King Roderick were found near the river bank. The king was never to be seen again. The victorious Muslims marched forward, and everywhere the Jews, slaves, and the common people hailed them as deliverers. Malaga and Granada were taken, and one of his officers, Muqid, took Cordoba with hardly a blow being struck. The city was left in the keeping of the Jews, who had proved themselves allies of the Muslim in the campaign. Tariq himself pressed onwards towards Toledo, the capital of the Goths. In the summer of 712, Musa himself crossed with 18,000 men, and after capturing Carmona, Sevilla, and Mérida, arrived in Toledo. By the autumn of 713, most of Spain was in Muslim hands. During the next 2 decades, the Muslim forces in Spain crossed the Pyrenees into France and captured Narbonne. The Muslim army swept northwards towards Paris and eastwards towards Italy. By 720, all the lands under the control of the Visigothic kings had been pacified, and it should be borne in mind that these lands comprised not just the Iberian Peninsula, but also the Visigothic provinces of Septiminia, that is to say, the Mediterranean France, stretching from the Pyrenees to Provence. It is about this time that we first hear mention of the dissension caused by the clergy in the North African region, which would have a serious effects on the events in Spain. In 741, they created mischief against the Arab governors in North Africa and set the Berbers in revolt. 30,000 troops from Syria had to be called in upon and attempt to restore order, but they were repulsed. The Berbers in Spain decided to support their kinsmen and began a revolt in Spain. Abd al-Malik, governor of Spain, called in the Syrian auxiliaries, and the revolt was eventually put down. Party rivalries continued to quarrel among themselves until, by a twist of circumstances, their master arrived from the east. When the Umayyads were overthrown in Syria, one Umayyad 20 years old, Abdul Rahman, the falcon of the Quraysh, escaped, and after 5 years as a fugitive and many adventures, he arrived in northwestern Africa, where he was given refuge. Through the respect of the Umayyan name, he rallied together a vast army and landed on the Spanish coast at Almuñécar in September 755. Abdurrahman entered Cordoba in triumph in 14th May 756, established his residence there, and changed the course of the Spanish history. The dynasty of the Umayyads in Cordoba, which he founded, was destined to endure for nearly 3 centuries. For 32 years, Abdurrahman ruled and developed the country and founded the remarkable dynasty which endured for more than 250 years and made possible a wonder of the world, the civilization of the Muslims in Spain. He united the communities and embarked on vast building projects for the welfare of his people. Bridges, roads, public baths, systems to provide ample running water, and mosques were constructed everywhere. In 786, 2 years before he died, he founded the Great Mosque of Cordoba. Since the 16th century, this mosque has housed within it a Roman Catholic cathedral. Yet, in spite of this, and although all trace of Muslim religious practice has been wiped out in Spain for nearly 400 years, it is still referred to on the city signposts and in the official guidebooks as La Mezquita. It is said that when the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor Charles V was shown the finished church inside the mosque, he cried out in anguish to those who had built it, "You have destroyed something which exists nowhere to create something which could be found everywhere."
وأقسم أنني يا ابن الكرام لقد أرسلت من رب العباد. تذكر يا أخي يوم التنادي وتب قبل الرحيل إلى المعاد، فأخرج كل حقدك من جنان وزك النفس من سم العناد وقد
In 912, that is, 200 years after Tariq's landing, the 22-year-old Abdurrahman III became king. Of the many monarchs who ruled Spain, no one was greater than him. Abdurrahman set out at once to consolidate the nation, and taking personal command of the army, retrieved the lost possessions in a long campaign lasting 18 years. By 930, Spain was fully under his control, and on the occasion of the Friday prayer in 16th January 929, Abdurrahman now took on the title of Khalifa, and his subjects in wonder and respect added great. His honorific name was An-Nasir li Dinillah, he who fights victoriously for the faith of Allah. Abdurrahman's court in Cordoba was amongst the most grand in history. Accredited to it were the envoys from the Byzantine Emperor and from the courts of Germany, France, and Italy. Cordoba's population, today a mere 250,000, then numbered 800,000. There were 700 mosques and 300 public baths at a time, when the European races still regarded bathing as a heathen custom. The streets, 10 miles of them, were paved and lit, a development which London and Paris were not to enjoy for another 7 centuries. There were 70 libraries housing over 400,000 volumes. The rulers of neighboring countries were sent to Cordoba if they needed a doctor or an architect, not to France or Germany. Cordoba University attracted students from all over the known world and was acknowledged as the center of learning. The university was one of Abdurrahman's concepts, along with many of the hundreds of mosques, but undoubtedly his most beautiful work was the magnificent marble palace and administrative center a few miles from Cordoba. which it is claimed was named after his wife Al-Zahra. Today, all that remains are the foundations and a few walls and floors of the palace and the royal suburb that grew up around it. All the rest was carted off after the Christian conquest in the 15th century to build the vast pink monastery of San Jerónimo in the hills above.
وآثرنا الحبيب على حياة وقمنا للشهادة بالعتاد تذكر يا أخي يوم التنادي وتب قبل الرحيل إلى
What happened between 1008 and 1031 was disorder. Various factions engaged in a power struggle in which the caliphs were used as puppets and enthroned and dethroned in quick succession. By the year 1031, the caliphate was extinct and Al-Andalus was plunged into total anarchy. The whole episode was ostensibly instigated by the mullahs. The Muslim states became in effect tributaries to the King of Castilla and paid tribute as a price of friendship. Over the years, the Christian ruler Alfonso demanded higher and higher payments, and the Muslims seemed blind to the fact that he was cleverly storing up for the great conquest which he had in mind. On the 25th of May 1085, Alfonso VI took the old Spanish capital of Toledo, and which had become the center of Muslim science and learning. Held for 372 years, Toledo was never to be recovered by the Muslims. The Christian forces concentrated in Toledo, and a final and decisive battle was fought on 16th July 1212, better known in the European history as Las Navas de Tolosa. The battle was long and desperately contested, but ultimately the Muslims were defeated. Many thousands of Muslims were slaughtered in cold blood after King Alfonso's victory. Las Navas de Tolosa was the Waterloo of Muslim rule in Spain, exactly 5 centuries after its conquest by Tariq. The real victim was the refined and cultural civilization of Muslim Andalus, still, even in its decadence, far in advance of Europe. Yet, it was to survive for nearly 3 more centuries in the Kingdom of Granada and continue its role of spreading knowledge and refinement to the emerging nations of the West. In 1232, the Nasrid dynasty came to power in Granada with the accession of Muhammad I. Córdoba fell in 1236, Valencia in 1238, and Sevilla on the 2nd November 1248. But Granada, under the control of Muhammad ibn Yusuf bin Nasir, held out defiantly to produce an even more thriving and fruitful culture. Hemmed in within the enclave of Granada, Muslim genius masterfully engineered the wonder and the beauty which is the Alhambra, the Red Palace.
وقمنا للشهادة بالعتاب تذكر يا أخي يوم التنادي وتب قبل الرحيل إلى المعاد فأخرج كل حقدك من جنان وزك النفس من سم العناد وما الخسران في موت بتقوى وخسر المرء في سبل الفساد وإني قد خرجت إلى ذكاء وفارت عين نور من فؤادي تذكر يا أخي يوم التنادي وتب قبل الرحيل
In 1469, the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castilla at last opened the way to the unity of Christian Spain. The final cause of the fall of Granada was the folly, disunity, and ultimate treachery of the leading members of the royal family, who fought among themselves as the Christians tightened their grip, until in 1492 Granada fell and Muhammad XI Abu Abdullah Boabdil rode up the small hill to gaze dejectedly at what had been truly one of the wonders of the world. There was one last act of courage and defiance before the city gave in. The brave and heroic General Musa came out from these gates behind me mounted on his horse, where it is said he was challenged by a party of Christian knights half a score strong. He slew many of them before he was mounted, and then he still fought stubbornly upon his knees. Finally, when he was too weak to continue the struggle, he was martyred in defense of the Muslim Spain. Spain never again rose to the heights she had attained under the Muslims, who had fashioned her into a land of peace and plenty, brought equity and justice and tolerance to reign, and lit a torch of culture in the fair land of Al-Andalus that illuminated the world for centuries.
उस पे लाखों दुरूद, उस पे लाखों सलाम।